Last week, our Sunday reading dealt with the concept of reincarnation. This week, we're dealing with karma. You really can't have karma without reincarnation. Otherwise, the system simply doesn't work. If you try to make it go from the time a soul appears in a baby's body till the time it breathes its last, often people do not reap what they sow. They seem to get away with it, or they seem to be unfairly punished, and it's completely confusing. Many times when I was teaching the beginning classes here in our temple, which I haven't done as much for many years, but the beginning meditation classes and other subjects that introduce people to the basic premises of self-realization, especially in the meditation classes, people would often come in with an anti-spiritual bias, and seeing the pictures on the altar, hearing prayers, there would sometimes be a certain pushback against what we were presenting here. So I would usually ask them, well, what God do you not believe in? And they would explain to me some concept of God that I think it was really a smart person would not believe in that God. It wasn't really rejecting the total concept of a greater reality. It was rejecting whatever image and picture of that had been presented through intellectual reading or other churches or whatever. It comes from many different places. So very often we take a position and we give words to it, but we're really just talking about rejecting certain ideas. I know our middle school teacher, Gary, had a conversation with one of his students in which the student was asserting that she had become an agnostic, perhaps even an atheist. I'm not sure how far it went, but it was probably agnostic. But he very wisely said back to her, I think what you're actually saying is that you're a truth seeker, which is, of course, just how you reframe things means everything, which is I want to know what's true. I don't want to just accept other people's point of view. And if it doesn't make sense to me, I have to be sincere to what I understand. But what happens to us, and I was talking about this last week, and we talk about it every week in the Festival of Light, first we rebel we go into a stage of revolt against what other people tell us is true, and we test that water for as long as it takes us to test that water. I was part of the 60s and the early 70s when we sort of started dismantling a great many things that were expected to be respected. Social mores, sexual mores, just marriage, life, drugs, not drugs, politics, the whole thing. I went through it pretty fast, but I actually had my picture on the front page of the Stanford Daily for sleeping in the administration building with all my cronies, protesting the Vietnam War, about which I knew almost nothing, which my father revealed my ignorance to me later in the most, it's not that I object, but can you answer even some very basic questions? No. I just sort of gone along with the crowd, and it seemed like the thing to do. I mean, I still remember me coming out clutching my pillow. That's the picture that was on the front page of the paper, like that, me and my pillow. And then only later did my father remind me that perhaps I should think a little deeper before I acted. He didn't even really object to my decision. He objected to the vacuous way in which I'd made it, which was fair. I appreciated that. But truth seeker is a very good word. That's what we're looking for. In fact, when Ananda first started in the early 70s, most of us came out of that culture one way or another. And sexuality was just a big revolution that we were really committed to at that time. I'm using the royal we here, not so much speaking about myself. I became a nun at a very young age, so it wasn't really my thing, so to speak. But there was a meeting I remember with Swamiji in which many of us who were just long-haired hippies, but now we were meditating, challenged Swamiji specifically on the question of sexuality. Of course, he was a monk and the representative of a very ancient tradition, and our little tiny tempest in a teapot didn't make a really great impression on him from the point of view of the ages. But it was a very challenging question. What do you think of the sexual revolution? And most people expected from him a dogmatic answer because they didn't know him very well. He said, well, overall, he said, I think it's a good thing, which was a bit shocking and kind of like, yes, he's on our side, like this. But then he said, and this was the caveat, provided people are honest in appraising their own experiences. Ah, there you have it, don't you? You know, my thing challenged my father asking me, what do you actually know about the politics that you're protesting? Have you put out any energy to learn? No, sir, not really. You know, I just caught the wave and rode it because it was more fun than the other wave. That was basically about how much sense I had at that point. But he said, provided we are honest in appraising our own experiences. Oh my, that is a big proviso, isn't it? It takes, and that is where the real work comes. He said, because moral principles, spiritual principles, are not man-made. And this is the rebellion that youth continually goes through, and appropriately. It rebels against hypocrisy. It rebels against selfishness. It rebels against stupidity. It rebels against thoughtlessness. All of these things are very good things to rebel against, provided we are honest in appraising our own experiences. And the reason Swamiji said, I think it's a good thing, is because people are making experience the criteria for their decisions. Because unless we actually really know it for ourselves, we're doing fine on sunny days, but when the pressure really comes, when we're really tested, and we're really having to stand up for what do I believe and why do I believe it, if it's just because somebody told me so, if somebody tells me something else, I'm just as likely to move over there. And really, in the end, it's the inner reality that counts, and if we don't have it, we actually really have, well, in the end, actually nothing at all, which is what we discover. Swami tells a heartrending story about his own cousin whose baby was born with some serious heart defect. This was a cousin he was very close to. And she was absolutely distraught, as any parent would be. And she spoke to her cousin, Swamiji, at one point because she knew he was a man of God and a serious person. She spoke to him just weeping, Swami said, because she was explaining to him, this was the most important thing to me in the world, and I wanted to pray to God to take care of my baby. She said, but even when I would try to pray, I would find myself wondering what I was going to make for dinner. And did I have all the right groceries? And maybe I need to think again about that new pair of shoes. And just there she was, claiming this relationship with God, claiming this love for her child, but having to be honest about her own experience and seeing how many different directions her mind was going at the same time. And what is really true about me and my life. Now, we find ourselves in this experience of life, which is so bewildering on so many levels. When I was my early years at Ananda, all through the 1970s, I lived at Ayodhya, which is the part of the Ananda village where Swami Kriyananda lives, and I lived with a group of women. We had a little monastery there, and we had a little teepee that was our temple, and we mostly lived in trailers. I don't think it was just all trailers. Nobody lived in teepees or cabins. It was just trailers, little trailers, and then the teepee temple. And every morning we'd go into our little teepee temple and we would meditate together there pretty much every morning for 8 or 9 years we did this. We got very close, especially the core group there of 6 or 7 women. We got very close with each other. And I recently mentioned to you when I went to Italy, I got to be with some of those women again, which was what was so nice. But every morning we'd meditate together. At the end of it, we would recite the poem Samadhi, and then we'd all go back to our own little places and usually meditate a little more on our own. And I used to have this strange thought that how is it that we could come together and unite our consciousness so completely, and everybody still took home the right ego? It's like, why didn't I randomly become Seva and just be Seva for a week or so, or Anandi or Parvati or any one of the women who were there? It was just like the mystery of individuality. And maybe I'm just nuts, but I used to think about it sometimes, sitting there like, why am I always me? And that really ends up being, like, that's the whole conundrum. That's what drives us onto the spiritual path, isn't it? The anguishing monotony of the inescapability of being me. And here I am. I still am me, you know? No matter how hard I've tried, no matter how many meditations I've had, no matter how many earnest prayers, this unity of I am this is what I do, this is my memories, this is what's happened to me, these are my inclinations. Thank you, God. It's not it's not in my way as much as it used to be. It used to just be this huge, I don't know how to describe it, like this giant shield made out of plywood that I had to carry with me. At least it's reduced itself down to something a little more manageable. But nonetheless, there it is, all the time. Swamiji, by contrast, was talking to us once. This was an experience we had at Disneyland, of all places. Swamiji used to like to take us to Disneyland every once in a while. Disneyland has changed through the years, and it's absorbed popular culture and now. But it used to be really a magic kingdom. It was just the vision of Walt Disney, and he just conceived of a world completely outside. And it was very innocent, and Swamiji really enjoyed that. And he loved the creativity and all of this. So he would take us there periodically, once a year, twice a year sometimes. So there was a whole group of us, about 13 or 14 of us. We'd been with Swamiji in Los Angeles at some kind of a spiritual fair. And then after the whole thing was done, we all went to Disneyland. And he was very, he was much younger. He was in his 40s, and he knew Disneyland really well. And he would lead us through the park from this place to this place. And literally, we would be holding hands, running along behind him. It's a very funny picture, but because he would move so fast and he would make decisions so quickly, and we just we looked like geese following its mother. It was, you can imagine. It was marvelous. And then when it came time for the electric parade, we wanted good place, so we went to the sidewalk a little bit early. And then some kind of a different spiritual mood came over Swamiji. And all of a sudden he became very inward, and we were all rotating around his aura, so whatever happened to him happened to us. All of a sudden his mood became very inward. And he just looked out, you know how the mobs are there from every country and shape and kind of people. And he just looked out, and in my mind, I remember there was a big group of Japanese people with pushing little children in carriages. So that was more exotic than others that we might see. And he just looked at them and he said, imagine, he said, not merely loving all these people. And then he let that sit for a minute while we tried to. That's why I remember the Japanese mother pushing her baby. I remember trying to love her, He said, imagine not only loving all these people, but actually being all these people. And then he said, that was Master's consciousness. Master was as much in everyone as he was in himself. And then that thought was so moving to us that we all sat down on the sidewalk and started meditating. And Swamiji was still vigorous enough to just sit on the sidewalk. So there's like 15 of us sitting around Swami, just meditating, because it was too powerful. And in fact, the presence of all those people made the meditation even deeper. Just sort of being in the midst and trying to feel that. We meditated there for maybe half an hour. We didn't wake up until the parade was in front of us. And then we sort of woke up, and we were now surrounded by people. I don't know what they thought of us. We just scrambled to our feet and went back to what we were doing. But every so often, when I am anywhere, that thought will come to me. Not merely loving, which is enough of a practice in itself, but actually being as much in the consciousness of everyone that you see as I am in myself. Now, that just takes the whole reality of truth. Who am I? What am I? Where does my happiness come from? Why do I do what I do? And it just flips it over. The Bhagavad Gita has that simple phrase, which is well worth remembering. What is day to the worldly person is night to the yogi. What is night to the worldly person is day to the yogi. And that can be commented on and has been for hundreds of years. But what we're trying to say is, if we're going to really look for truth, we have to be willing to just flip it over, just completely flip it over, because all of our life experience is based on this inescapability of my uniqueness. And a tremendous amount of everything we do is in order to work with that thing which is me. These are my values. This is what I do. This is how I behave. This is important to me. I have to stand up for this. I have to stand up for that. And there is a stage in our development where we have to develop that individuality. There is a continuous progression through the consciousness of animals up to a human level, all the way up to the infinite, where the individuality that is us has to progress through all of these stages. It, I think, boggles the mind is the only way that you can speak about these things. Swamiji made the interesting comment once. He said, I see everyone as just egos on a spectrum. He said, from delusion to self-realization. He said, even animals, he said, it's just a continuous spectrum of lesser and greater awareness until awareness becomes infinite. It was always so interesting to see Swamiji relate to animals. He didn't relate to animals very much. It wasn't his ministry to work with animals. But I don't want to diminish the importance of it. It is said that Lahiri Mahashaya, one of our gurus, was, quote, working on a method for animals to be liberated directly without having to go through the human stage. You know what? I don't know. I'll give one of Swami's answers when I asked him a very esoteric question. He went, he just shrugged his shoulders. I have no idea even what that means. In Ramana Maharshi's ashram, there are 2 Mahasamadhi Mandirs. A Mahasamadhi Mandir is where the remains of a self-realized being are put because the vibration there is so powerful. With the Moksha Mandir for Swami Kriyananda is where his body is. At Ramana Maharshi's ashram, there are 2 Moksha Mandirs, one for a crow and one for a cow. Because the Guru said, because of their devotion to me, they were liberated. Were they human beings who took those forms? Did the Guru just skip them along? Was it the most precocious crow that was ever incarnated? My mind just goes nowhere. I don't know what to think about these things. Anandamayi Ma once, a fly kept landing on her face, and her devotees kept pushing it away. She said, no, it's a saint who just wanted to be close to this body. And so how long is the lifespan of a fly? So it just came and it hung out with her for a little time, and then it was done. Many things happen that are quite mysterious. But I was starting to say it was so fun to watch Swami relate to animals because I don't know how to say it exactly, especially dogs. He tended to address all dogs as, this was his greeting, hello beast, he would say. In a very sort of affectionate, slightly curious way, hello beast, like that. And he would just kind of peer at it. He was disinclined to pet it or, cuddle animal. I don't think I ever saw him really even touch an animal particularly. But there was this great sort of inquiry, like, who are you and how can I help you? Just the same as he related to all the rest of us. He was always just sort of peering at us and wondering how he could help us. And then responding, because it's not enough even just to love. We have to be inside each other. We have to actually stand, more than wear the moccasins, we have to actually be inside all that reality and realize how equal we all are before God. And thinking again about the animals, we have to come to the stage of ego awareness. We think that animals are more advanced, but unfortunately, as a group, they haven't even risen to the point where egoic selfishness can really come into play. It's not that they've transcended it, they just haven't gotten there yet. They just don't have the ego development to to reflect on the consequences, to be honest about the consequences of their own experience. You know, the dog just doesn't know. He just gets excited about chasing the ball. I mean, I'm sure all of you have had the experience of throwing a ball to the kind of dog that likes to retrieve the ball. And you throw the ball and the dog retrieves it and he comes rushing up and he drops it at your feet again. And you think, how long can we do this? I was thinking when I was hearing about service dogs, dogs that are trained, you know, to be really helpful, what a relief it must be for a dog to finally have something useful to do. Can you imagine incarnations of chasing that stupid ball and bringing it back? I mean, after a while, the anguishing monotony of it. Think about it. And finally, I can be helpful to someone. But you see, that's how we progress. And human beings are exactly the same. We spend incarnations just chasing that ball and getting it and thinking we got it one more time, you know, and then we wait for it to be thrown again, and then we chase it, and then after a while, we have the ego awareness to realize this is not really progressing. You know, this was a lot more fun when we started than it is now. I've gotten really used to this. This is the honesty of our own experience. Because all of the moral and divine laws are not imposed from the outside. They are perceived from the inside. What finally becomes religion doesn't start as religion. It starts as the revelation of someone who can see it from above. That's what Swami was saying in the reading today. That they see the threads of karma, not from here where we see it, where we forget, you know, that 10 incarnations ago we were a pretty nasty person and sent a boomerang out that is now whacking us in the side of the head. And we think, where did that come from? Because we can't see it from above. We can't see that we took something that didn't belong to us, whether it was whatever it was, and so we set in motion an energy that means that it has to be returned. And that's what all of karma is. There is a truth, and that truth is it's not enough merely to love everyone. We have to actually be everyone. This is what Trilanga Swami says to his detractor. You know, I understand. You don't understand that when you try to hurt me, you're hurting yourself. And Trilanga Swami, being a saint, was able to create instant karma for this man. We used to talk about this in the early years of Ananda, that instant karma is good karma. Because instant karma means you make the mistake, you get the result. And so you have to be really stupid not to see the relationship when that happens. Years ago, I won't tell you the whole story, but years ago I was in an ancient Durga temple in India, which was very run down, and it was overrun by monkeys. And the flowers, this priest kept putting this garland around my neck of slightly rotting marigolds that had this really putrid smell. And I was being very rude in my mind about these, you know, stupid rituals in this country. What are these people thinking like this? And I'm just going along with these negative thoughts, and a monkey jumped on my back. Whoa, like that was a wake-up call, like that. And I grabbed the monkey. I was much braver than in theory, I can't imagine being this brave, but in fact, this is what happened. He jumped on my back, I grabbed him. I grabbed the monkey, I pulled him up, I threw him on the ground. I said, "Get away from me, you filthy thing!" Like this, I did all this without thinking. Then the monkey put his teeth, unfortunately, into my dress. Could have been my leg, but he put his teeth into my dress. And then I kept saying, "Let go of me, you filthy thing!" Like this. By which point all the priests and everybody and my 30 pilgrims, everybody was surrounding me. But it was perfect because I thought to myself, Mother Durga, you know, a little more respect would be in order here. Because it was just 1-2 like that. But most of the time it isn't. For that man with Trilanga Swami, it was like that. Oh yeah. If I try to hurt you, I'm actually hurting myself, aren't I? And hurt is not just trying to poison with lime or a monkey trying to take a piece of your leg or anything like that. Hurt is lack of sympathy, lack of compassion, lack of love, then it doesn't always mean that you're nice. You have to realize that. You know, saints and masters are not always nice, but they're always appropriate out of a sense of what will move you in the right direction. And how do we know that? We know that because we have expanded beyond our self-interest and can actually perceive someone else's reality. Education for life, Swami describes as true education is the ability to perceive realities other than our own. I mean, that's really about the only motto you need to put on your wall. And you may perceive that someone else's reality is genuinely hurtful, and my job is to stop them. Master said even in the highest ages, we will need international police forces because bullies will need to be stopped. And sometimes bullies have to be stopped with physical force. It isn't that we always have to be nice, but we always have to be appropriately responding according to our sense of unity with everyone else's consciousness. We are all God's children equally. God loves us all equally, not just Krishna and Christ and all the great masters, but even those on earth who have sinned most greatly. He may treat us differently because we need to be treated differently, because how else will we learn? And that's just a simple question. How else will I learn? Almost everyone who is honest about their own experience is willing to say it was a horrible experience, but I never would have learned what I needed to learn otherwise. How many times can we look back and say that? You know, and that's what we have to remember. And then we find it not so difficult to stand strong in our point of view, to allow others to have to go through what they have to go through. You know, we're not necessarily helping people by always trying to protect them. Always protecting you from being hurt. Think about it when a mother raises a child. One of my friends, unfortunately, quote, just couldn't stand to hear her children cry. I mean, you know, cry because they weren't getting what they wanted. So she gave them everything they wanted. And as a consequence, gave them almost nothing that they needed. Divine Mother doesn't behave that way. That's what karma is. It happens to us because we need it. Don't even say because we deserve it or anything like that, because we need it. I need this experience. Because what do I really want? Do I want to just chase that little tennis ball and bring it back and have it be thrown out again and run after it again? I mean, is that really in our heart of hearts what we want? Of course not. The soul is restless. The heart is restless until it finds its rest in divine truth. We must become truth seekers with courage, asking every time, okay, Lord, I can pretty much tell because this happened to me, it's something that I need. When my parents were at the end of their life and, you know, they were aging and they were ill and everything was falling apart, it's a very freaky experience when the people you love have to go through something like that. And first, I kept trying to stop the experience. I kept trying to take over and make it go the way I wanted it to go, even to the point of suggesting that maybe it would be good if they left their bodies sooner rather than later. To the point where my mother, God bless her, said to me one day, every time I cough, you think I'm about to die. I'm not about to die, she said. There's lots of life left in me yet. And I thought, oh, good heavens, she's absolutely right. You know, I was just seeing it from my point of view, having a rather casual attitude about birth and death. I just thought she'd be, you know, it would be easier, but it was really easier for me if she just wound up her incarnation and went on. So my prayer became, and I thank you, Lord, for this experience, God, whatever it is you're trying to teach them, help them to learn it. Then I added, and soon if possible. Because they may be doing fine, but I'm not. But you know, everything, of course, shifted at that point. But think of that as a prayer. Whatever they're trying to learn, help them to learn it. And if you have to say honestly, and soon if possible, how different that is. Then you need to do it my way. That's why we're at it so long, is because of what Master calls all these thwarting cross currents of ego. And the whole game is not only to love everyone, but actually to be everyone. That was master state of consciousness. And sooner or later, also be ours. God bless.